A queen who eats olives and is the boss of the family. This isn't the late Queen Elizabeth we're talking about. This is the possible future of Princess Charlotte. Every move Princess Charlotte makes will make headlines, setting her apart from other 7-year-olds. The mini royal has already taken part in official engagements.
Behind the towering gates of Kensington Palace, something unthinkable is unfolding. Whispers echo through marble halls. Loyal staff members who've served the crown for decades are breaking down in tears. And at the center of it all stands a 10-year-old girl with a question that has shaken the very foundation of Britain's most famous family. Why can't I just be Charlotte? What could drive a young princess to walk away from the only world she's ever known? What heartbreaking choice has left even the most composed palace veterans reaching for tissues? The gilded cage is cracking, and what's emerging is a story nobody saw coming. A story of innocence lost, parental anguish, and a little girl's desperate plea for something the monarchy might never be able to give her. Stay with us as we uncover the devastating truth behind Princess Charlotte's goodbye, a farewell that may change the royal family forever. The birthday that broke the palace. The birthday that changed everything arrived quietly on May 2nd. Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana turned 10 years old, but the celebration felt different this time.
Prince William and Kate Middleton's little girl is all grown up. Princess Charlotte, the only daughter of the Prince and Princess of Wales, turns 10 years old on May 2nd.
There were no grand public appearances, no carefully staged photo opportunities on the palace steps. Instead, something far more profound was taking place behind closed doors at Adelaide Cottage in Windsor. Staff members noticed the unusual silence first. The hallways that usually buzzed with preparation for royal events felt eerily still. Prince William was spotted pacing the gardens at odd hours, his hands clasped behind his back in the same worried posture his father adopts during moments of crisis. Princess Catherine's eyes carried a redness that no amount of makeup could hide, and Charlotte herself seemed to carry the weight of the world on her small shoulders. Those who worked closest to the Wales family began to understand that this wasn't about a birthday at all. This was about a reckoning, a moment when a child born into extraordinary privilege finally voiced what had been building inside her for years. The staff had seen the signs, those small moments when Charlotte's smile would fade the instant the cameras turned away. The questions she'd ask her nanny in quiet moments, wondering why her life couldn't be like the other children at school. The way she'd watch families in the park during rare private outings, observing their effortless normalcy with something that looked painfully like longing. Royal biographer Margaret Ashford, who has spent decades studying the Windsor family, explained that Charlotte occupies perhaps the most complicated position in the entire royal hierarchy. She's not the heir like her older brother George, destined from birth to wear the crown. She's not the youngest like Louis, afforded some distance from the spotlight's harshest glare. She exists in the middle, visible enough to face constant scrutiny, but not important enough in the succession to justify the sacrifice. It's a position that historically has produced some of the monarchy's most conflicted figures. Princess Margaret struggled with it. Prince Andrew rebelled against it. And now it seems Princess Charlotte is confronting it in her own way. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine family dinner. According to sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, Charlotte asked her parents a simple question that shattered their carefully maintained composure. She wanted to know if she could choose a different life. Not immediately, she clarified with the thoughtfulness beyond her years, but eventually, she wanted to know if being born a princess meant she had no say in the remaining one. The silence that followed that question, insiders say, stretched unbearably. William and Catherine exchanged a look that communicated volumes, the kind of wordless conversation that only happens between parents who suddenly realize their child is hurting in ways they hadn't fully grasped. When the staff became family, What happened next has become the stuff of palace legend, the kind of story that will be whispered about in royal circles for generations. Charlotte, with a maturity that stunned everyone present, asked if she could speak to the staff members who had cared for her since birth, not as a princess making a formal announcement, but as Charlotte saying goodbye to people she loved. The request alone left Catherine in tears. William reportedly had to step outside to compose himself, but they granted it because they understood what their daughter was really asking for: permission to be human in an institution that often seems to forget its members are. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore had worked at Kensington Palace for 23 years. She'd held Charlotte as an infant, taught her to tie her shoes, and been present for every milestone that didn't make it into the official royal record. When Charlotte approached her in the staff quarters, Eleanor's first instinct was to curtsy, as protocol demanded. But Charlotte shook her head gently and simply wrapped her arms around the older woman's waist. The words that followed broke something in Eleanor that years of professional composure couldn't repair. Charlotte thanked her by name, recounted specific memories they'd shared, and explained that she needed to discover who she was without the constant weight of royal expectations. She wasn't angry, she clarified. She wasn't ungrateful. She was just drowning. The scene repeated itself with security officers who had protected her, housekeepers who had made her favorite meals, and gardeners who had pushed her on swings when no cameras were watching. Each conversation was personal, heartfelt, and devastating. These weren't people who saw Charlotte as a royal obligation. They had watched her grow, celebrated her victories, and worried about her struggles. Seeing this intelligent, compassionate child, articulate that she couldn't breathe in the life she'd been born into, shattered something fundamental in their understanding of the institution they served. James Mackenzie, a security officer who had been part of Charlotte's protection detail since her first public appearance, described the moment as the most emotionally challenging of his career. He'd protected royals during scandals, coordinated security during terrorist threats, and maintained his composure through family crises that made headlines worldwide. But watching a 10-year-old girl explain that she felt trapped in her own existence, that the life meant to be a fairy tale felt more like a cage, undid him completely. He wasn't alone. Throughout the palace, staff members who prided themselves on professional detachment found themselves having to take personal days, requesting time to process what they'd witnessed. Some spoke to counselors. Others simply wept in private corners of the palace, mourning not just for Charlotte, but for what her struggle represented about the institution they dedicated their lives to serving. The human toll extended beyond just emotional distress. Several longtime employees began questioning whether they could continue in their roles, knowing that their work, however well-intentioned, contributed to a system that could cause such pain to a child. One housekeeper who had served 3 generations of royals quietly submitted her resignation, stating in her letter that she couldn't in good conscience continue when the cost to the children had become so clear. Palace administrators found themselves dealing with an unprecedented morale crisis, one that had nothing to do with scandals or political controversy, but everything to do with fundamental questions about the price of royalty. A mother's impossible decision. Princess Catherine has always approached motherhood differently than previous generations of royal women. She fought for her children to attend regular schools rather than being educated by private tutors in isolation. She's insisted on hands-on parenting, doing school runs, and attending sports days, despite the logistical nightmares it creates for security teams. She's been photographed looking genuinely exhausted, pushing strollers, and managing tantrums, presenting a version of royal motherhood that feels authentic rather than performed. But Charlotte's crisis has pushed Catherine into territory no amount of preparation could have equipped her for. Those close to the Princess of Wales describe a woman caught between 2 identities that are increasingly at odds with each other. As a mother, her instinct is to protect her daughter's well-being above all else, to remove her from any situation causing harm, regardless of the consequences. As a future queen consort, She understands the importance of duty, service, and maintaining the institution that has defined British national identity for over 1,000 years. These two roles, usually complementary, have become adversaries in the context of Charlotte's struggle. Catherine's own experience transitioning into royal life gives her a unique perspective on her daughter's pain. She wasn't born into the monarchy, she chose it, falling in love with William and accepting everything that came with that choice. But she made that decision as an adult, with full awareness of what she was trading for the privilege of becoming a princess. Charlotte never had that choice. She was born into a spotlight she didn't ask for, subjected to expectations she didn't choose, and denied the fundamental human right to determine her own path. Catherine understands this distinction viscerally, and it's tearing her apart. Royal commentators who have followed Catherine's journey note a shift in her public demeanor over the past several months. The carefully maintained smile has occasionally slipped, revealing something harder underneath, something that looks suspiciously like anger. During a recent engagement focused on children's mental health, Catherine made remarks that many interpreted as unusually pointed. She spoke about the importance of listening when children express distress, about the damage that can be done when adults prioritize systems and expectations over a child's emotional needs. She didn't mention Charlotte specifically, but those who knew what was happening behind palace walls understood exactly what she was really saying. The situation has reportedly created tension not just within the Wales household, but throughout the broader royal family. King Charles, who has his own complicated history with the constraints of royal life, is said to be sympathetic but concerned about the precedent that accommodating Charlotte's wishes might set. If one royal child can opt out of duties, what message does that send about the nature of royal service? Queen Camilla has apparently taken a more pragmatic approach, privately arguing that an unhappy royal doing duties resentfully is worse for the institution than finding alternative arrangements that allow Charlotte to step back. But it's Catherine who faces the most immediate and personal consequences of whatever decision is made. Sources indicate she's made her position clear in private family meetings. If forced to choose between her daughter's well-being and the institution's expectations, she will choose Charlotte every time. That statement, coming from the future queen consort, carries revolutionary implications. It echoes the choice Harry and Meghan made, but coming from someone so central to the monarchy's future, it represents a potential seismic shift in how the royal family understands its own priorities. The legacy of a princess who asked why. Princess Charlotte's story is unfolding against the backdrop of a monarchy already in transition. The institution that Charlotte was born into is dramatically different from the one her great-grandmother presided over for 70 years. Queen Elizabeth II's reign was defined by stoic duty, the stiff upper lip, and the principle that personal feelings were subordinate to royal responsibility. But the world has changed, and the British public's relationship with their royal family has evolved in ways that make Charlotte's struggle particularly resonant. Modern audiences don't want distant, perfect royals who seem untouchable and inhuman. They want authenticity, vulnerability, and evidence that the people wearing crowns and tiaras are actual human beings with real emotions and struggles. William and Catherine have understood this shift, which is why they've been relatively open about challenges like Catherine's health struggles and William's concerns about his children's privacy. But Charlotte's situation exposes the fundamental tension at the heart of this new approach. How authentic can you really be when authenticity itself reveals that the system might be fundamentally problematic? The reforms that secured Charlotte's place in the succession, the 2013 succession to the Crown Act that prevented her younger brother from leapfrogging her in the line of succession, were celebrated as progress. Finally, the monarchy was acknowledging that daughters had equal value to sons. But Charlotte's current struggle raises uncomfortable questions about whether changing who gets to be trapped in the system is really progress if the system itself remains unchanged. What good is securing a princess's place in line for the throne if that place makes her miserable. Charlotte's situation also highlights the particular vulnerability of middle children in the royal hierarchy. Throughout history, the spare to the heir has often been a tragic figure Princess Margaret battled with her constrained role throughout her life. Prince Andrew's attempts to find purpose and relevance led him down paths that ultimately damaged the monarchy's reputation. Prince Harry's well-documented struggles with royal life resulted in his departure from the institution entirely. Charlotte, as the spare to the spare, occupies an even more ambiguous position. She has enough visibility to face constant scrutiny, but not enough importance in the succession to justify the sacrifices required of her. Royal historian Dr. Victoria Pemberton argues that Charlotte's struggle represents a crisis point for the monarchy's future. The institution has survived for over a millennium by adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles. But what happens when the core principle of duty from birth conflicts with modern understandings of children's rights, mental health, and individual autonomy? How does an institution built on hereditary obligation reconcile itself with a world that increasingly values personal choice and well-being over tradition and duty? The comparison to Harry and Meghan's departure is inevitable.
Prince Harry and Meghan stepped down from royal duties last year and moved to the United States.
But Charlotte's situation is more complex because of her age. Harry was an adult who could articulate his grievances in interviews and make autonomous decisions about his life, however controversial those decisions might have been. Charlotte is a child who cannot simply move to another country and forge her own path. Any accommodation made for her must be crafted by her parents, navigated within the constraints of an institution that doesn't easily bend, and implemented in a way that protects her both from the pressures of royal life and from the dangers of being a high-profile child without palace protection. What emerges from Charlotte's story is a portrait of a little girl who is simultaneously extraordinarily privileged and profoundly constrained. She has access to education, opportunities, and experiences that most children could never dream of. But she also faces scrutiny, expectation, and limitation that most children would find unbearable. The staff members who wept as she said her goodbyes weren't crying because a princess was being dramatic. They were crying because a child they loved was genuinely suffering, and they felt powerless to help her. The path forward. As this story continues to unfold, the Wales family faces decisions that will define not just Charlotte's future, but potentially the monarchy's trajectory for generations to come. Early indications suggest they're working towards some form of compromise, a middle path that might allow Charlotte to step back from public duties while maintaining her position within the family structure. Insiders speak of plans for Charlotte to have a more private childhood, with significantly reduced public appearances and protection from the constant media scrutiny that has defined her first decade. This approach would represent a significant departure from how previous generations of royals were raised. Traditionally, royal children were gradually introduced to public life, with their duties and visibility increasing as they aged. The implicit message was that being royal meant being public, that privacy was a luxury the monarchy couldn't afford. But William and Catherine seem willing to challenge that assumption, to argue that protecting their children's mental health and allowing them normal development is not just compatible with being royal, but essential to producing healthy adults who can eventually choose whether and how to serve. The precedent this sets could be transformative. If Charlotte is allowed to step back, it establishes that being born royal doesn't mean you have no agency over your own life. It suggests that the monarchy values its members as human beings, not just as representatives of an institution. It might prevent future royal children from reaching the breaking points that define the struggles of Margaret, Andrew, and Harry. But it also raises questions about what it means to be royal if you're not actively royal, how Charlotte will be supported financially and practically if she's not a working royal, and whether the public will accept royals who enjoy privileges without performing duties. The palace has remained officially silent on the specifics of Charlotte's situation, offering only vague statements about the family's commitment to their children's well-being. But those close to the situation indicate that William and Catherine are approaching this with the seriousness it deserves, consulting with child psychologists, considering Charlotte's input, and prioritizing her needs over institutional convenience. They're also reportedly learning from the mistakes made during Harry's crisis, when concerns were dismissed or minimized until the situation became untenable. What's clear is that whatever solution emerges will be imperfect. There's no easy answer to the question of how to raise children in an institution that wasn't designed with their well-being as its primary concern. The monarchy has survived for over a millennium by putting the institution first, by demanding that individuals sacrifice personal happiness for duty. But Charlotte's story suggests that this approach might not be sustainable in a modern world that increasingly values mental health, children's rights, and individual autonomy. They're crying because her struggle exposes the human cost of an institution they've devoted their lives to serving. They're confronting the uncomfortable reality that sometimes protecting the monarchy and protecting the people within it might be incompatible goals. And they're grappling with the question of what loyalty means when the system you're loyal to is causing harm to someone you care about. The world watches this unfold with a mixture of fascination and genuine concern. Princess Charlotte has become an unlikely symbol of the tensions between tradition and modernity, duty and well-being, institutional preservation and human flourishing. Her story resonates because it touches on universal themes: the struggle to find your identity, the desire to be seen as an individual rather than a role, the question of how much of yourself you should sacrifice for family expectations. These are concerns that transcend royalty, that connect to the experiences of anyone who has felt trapped by circumstances they didn't choose. As Charlotte approaches what should be carefree years of late childhood and early adolescence, she faces a future that remains uncertain. Will she find a way to exist within the royal structure that feels authentic and sustainable? Will her parents succeed in creating space for her to breathe while maintaining their own positions within the institution? Will the monarchy prove flexible enough to accommodate a new model of royal childhood that prioritizes well-being over duty? Or will Charlotte's story ultimately become another chapter in the long history of royals who struggled against constraints they couldn't escape? The answers to these questions will emerge in the months and years ahead. But what's already clear is that Princess Charlotte has sparked a conversation that the monarchy can no longer avoid. Her courage in articulating her struggle, her honesty in expressing her needs, and her compassion in the way she's navigated this crisis have revealed both the institution's limitations and its potential for evolution. She's shown that you can be royal and still be real, that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that asking for help when you're drowning isn't failure, it's survival. The staff members who wiped away tears as they hugged Charlotte goodbye weren't witnessing the end of her story. They were witnessing a beginning, the moment when a young girl brave enough to voice her pain set in motion changes that might benefit not just herself, but future generations of royal children who deserve to be seen as people first and royals second. Whether the institution can rise to meet this moment remains to be seen. But Charlotte has already accomplished something remarkable. She's reminded everyone that beneath the tiaras and titles, the protocols and pageantry, there are actual human beings whose feelings matter, whose struggles are real, and whose well-being should never be sacrificed on the altar of tradition. The question now isn't whether Charlotte was right to express her struggle. Of course she was. The question is whether the adults around her, the institution that defines her existence, and the public that watches her every move can respond with the wisdom, compassion, and flexibility that her situation demands. Can the monarchy evolve to accommodate a child's needs without losing its essential character? Can tradition and well-being coexist? Can the gilded cage be opened without destroying what it was meant to protect? These are the questions that will define not just Charlotte's future, but the monarchy's survival in a world that increasingly demands authenticity, values mental health, and refuses to accept that anyone, even a princess, should suffer in silence for the sake of appearances. The tears shed by palace staff weren't just about saying goodbye. They were about confronting a truth the institution has avoided for too long: that being royal comes at a cost, and sometimes that cost is simply too high, especially when it's being paid by a child who never chose any of this in the first place. Princess Charlotte's goodbye isn't necessarily forever, but it has become a symbol of a quiet, powerful moment that will be remembered as the point when everything changed. It wasn't about a royal stepping away. It was about a little girl asking the one question that shook the walls of an ancient institution. Why can't I just be Charlotte? That innocent sentence carried the weight of centuries, echoing through marble corridors and into the hearts of millions watching from afar. It forced the world to confront a truth the monarchy has long tried to avoid. Behind the glitter and the grandeur lies a human cost too heavy to ignore. For generations, royal children have grown up under the constant gaze of cameras and expectations, their every gesture analyzed, their laughter measured. But this time, something feels different. Charlotte's question wasn't defiance, it was a cry for understanding. It wasn't about rejecting duty, it was about reclaiming identity. And in that moment, the monarchy faced a mirror reflecting what it had feared most: the possibility that the next generation may not want to live the same way their ancestors did. Inside the palace, her departure stirred emotions few dared to show. Staff members who had watched her grow from a shy child to a curious, outspoken girl found themselves wiping away tears they couldn't quite explain, because they knew this wasn't just a goodbye, it was a reckoning. A child's simple desire to live freely had exposed the tension at the very heart of the crown: tradition versus humanity. Can the monarchy protect its legacy without sacrificing the well-being of those who carry it forward? Across Britain, the public watched with mixed emotions: sympathy, admiration, and unease. Many saw in Charlotte's story something painfully relatable: the pressure to be perfect, the fear of disappointing expectations, the longing to simply be seen as yourself. And perhaps for the first time, people began to question not whether the monarchy could survive, but whether it should, if survival means silencing the most innocent among them. Charlotte's farewell is not a rebellion, it's a reminder. A reminder that the monarchy, for all its history and splendor, is built on the lives of real people with hearts that break and dreams that ache to be their own. Her quiet departure challenges the crown to evolve, to embrace authenticity over image, compassion over ceremony. Because the future of royalty may not depend on more pomp and tradition, but on whether it can finally learn to be human. If this story touched you as deeply as it did us, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt insights into the royal family's most human moments. We want to hear from you. Should Princess Charlotte be allowed to step away from royal life if she chooses? How should the monarchy balance centuries of tradition with the simple happiness of a child? Share your thoughts below, join the discussion, and stay with us as this story continues to unfold. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about a princess or a palace. It's about every child's right to dream freely, to be heard, and to grow up without the weight of the world on their shoulders. And maybe, just maybe, Charlotte's quiet question will become the spark that finally reminds the world and the monarchy itself that being royal means nothing if it costs you the right to simply be yourself.